for having me in the Summer Academy. It's been a couple of days, but I very much enjoy it. And it's a pleasure to be back here.
Is it a work?
Good. Pleasure to be back. Yes, okay. I cannot do that. Right. Okay, good. So, it's been a Salzburg year for me because I came first time to research der archive, a amazing dance archive in Salzburg in December. Then I took a part of a fantastic show, Dance, Kunst, Dance.
Kunst, Musik, Tanz, Dance,
Dankeschön. And so it's the second time I'm on this stage. Last time I was with Sergi Cherepnin, and of course Andrea Geil was here. So I want to deal with a topic with you today which occupies my 20 years of presenting my work, and I called this theme the Applied Fantastic, and I would like to introduce you to the topic by showing you a lot of examples of the Applied Fantastic. Applied Fantastic is a term created by Leopold Tyrmand, a Polish writer, when he, I don't like this position so much, when he in 1960s, that's okay, in 1960s, maybe...
You can get your podium if you want to stand it.
No, like, I try like this. In 1960s when he, okay, I'm going to concentrate. So imagine this. Poland, 1960s, socialism, yes? A lovely woman enters a cafe. She's dressed in the improvised necessity way, which means the applied fantastic. What Leopold Tyrmand is talking about, it's the dress based on the look of the Western, but it's a self-created fashion object. And applied fantastic is a term that how we can create from more or less the leftovers a different kind of improvised reality. For a long time from the beginning, this is from the year 2000 from the Rijksacademie. I like to start with this image because it's an image when I started to reconstruct the idea, what I call the utopic optimism, and I wanted to refer in the times of postmodernism. Can we relate again to modernism? So this is a little bit a take on Stepanova, the idea of like, can you wear the abstraction, can you wear the avant-garde again? And this image became a poster, which I later called Reconstructing Modernism, which was after a book by Griselda Pollock. And my dear friend, collaborator, Lucy Mackenzie, when I made the poster in Rijksacademie, big printers, she pointed out that I actually made a spelling mistake. And the poster said, Reconstructing Modernism. And I was terrified, but I decided that this is really how I work. I don't work in a kind of art historical reference way. I much more appropriate things which I feel can collage my own reality. Here you see the reconstructed shoes, the rockabilly shoes in kind of Piet Mondrian style. This is one of my early paintings. It's called Bridget 1962. And I will speak further about it. It's about also a woman being kind of captivated by her own production, the abstraction. So in a lot of my earlier work, the topic, especially in painting, because I come from the background of painting, is the relationship of a figurative to the abstract, which we talk in the class a lot. This is a painting that I really love. It's this size, and it's called Big Pollock. And it's taken from a fashion advertising, but I wanted to kind of appropriate the gesture of the drip. And actually, the original, if you know the photograph, you can very easily find it because it's on the cover of the Reconstructing Modernism book. It's a model standing in the back of the Pollock. So the art becomes the background, which kind of fascinated me to put back into the painting again. This is a self-portrait that I was super ashamed of until Bonami came to my studio in the Rex Academy, and we digged it out from my background. And I think now I understand why it's a good painting, but I called it the X. And it's my self-portrait. And I have a technique which I didn't discuss with the class, how you can erase oil paint. So the big splash that you see, it's an erased paint, and you see a couple of names of men. So you see Jasper, Piotr, Rugo, which probably you can know that there was some relationship. But I think for me it's a very good self-portrait, like I have enough relationship to the painting, how the painting is. This painting is from 2001. This is another pose of mine, which is, this is a poster for a Nowa Popularna bar. This is one of my first collaboration with a Scottish/Belgium artist, Lucy Mackenzie, fantastic painter and an artist. And in 2006, we were invited to Foxal Gallery Foundation to create an exhibition. We decided not to do the exhibition in the gallery, but occupy some kind of a building, and in the tradition of Kippenberger, in the tradition in Kienholz, in the tradition of Stedelijk, the Apple bar, to create a bar. This is the years of the transformation in Poland, yes? There's nothing as cafes, there's no cappuccinos, there's nothing. So we decided to create something in the manner of a fashion of 1920s thinkers, that we could create an intellectual salon where things sometimes are improvised, where we invite high-end public, such as a classical concert by artist Mathilde Rosier, to Night Shift, Markus Selk and his friend, we had Mark Lecky's band playing as well, and different evenings. The bar existed for 1 month, as much as a show can exist, yes? The idea on the first day, it was an experiment. It was not about the success of the bar. It was also, the bar was not advertised. So if you would be in Warsaw, you'd hear like, oh, did you hear about this place? I kind of think it's an exhibition, is it a salon? Where like people meet for concert and they have really good vodka. So the vodka was before the term ecological period. It was a 45% vodka, and it was an illegal bar. And how we created illegal that if Hildegund would come to our bar, she would receive a little ticket for 5 zloty, and I would say, please go to my colleague Lucy Mackenzie, and she's going to pour you a drink. Because, we had police coming in from time to time, and you can imagine what. Anyway, it was also about how do you deal with history and memory. So we decided to leave away all the history, to leave away the bar, never repeat the bar. We had a lot of offers to do it in the Tate, and Stedelijk and so on, but we decided to create a record, and this is the record, and this is the inside of the record. And on the record you have the concerts of different our venues, you have some poetry, and when you open the record you have a version of the mini bar. So how I was thinking of how I can deal with modernism, what can I do with modernism, and to tell you a little bit about my background. I was born in Poland. I was the daughter of one of the Solidarity movement rape appraisers. So my dad was able to leave Poland, and he went to the States. And he tried to move the family to the States. Many things happened, but I lived in both of the countries. So I lived in Chicago from one side, and I lived in Poland at the same time. And I think what happened after many of my travels, because I studied from Portugal to Japan to the States to Amsterdam, I decided to go back in 2006 after the Rex Academy to Poland, because I was seeing that as the newborn, like after the change of the system, the country really didn't have a feeling what to do with the past. So they wanted to completely erase it. So this is called the Isometric Display. It's from 2007. It's in an art fair in Cologne. And I call it an asymmetric display because it's taken, appropriated from the images of lonely window displays, yes, in Warsaw, that they have nothing actually to sell. So you have some fabrics, you have a mirror, you have like 2 mannequins. And I thought it was an interesting take, and I think in my work, juxtaposition or the contextualization of the work is really kind of important. This is another version of a cafe bar. This is in National Museum in Krakow, which caused quite a discussion to show how they take care of the modernism. And this is my alphabet, and I'm going to play you a little clip from the alphabet. Am I doing okay, Sebastian?
Yes.
Can I make it bigger? That's big enough.
Can we get rid of these icons?
Can we?
I don't know.
Yes, fantastic. Especially for Sabine. And we are working actually with Sabine Brersky here on this.
Alphabet. A. B. C. D. E. Fan. D. Is really good. You can only get it in the KDB. You're fucking fantastic!
2012.
Escape.
Escape. Corner.
Left.
Thank you.
No,
Sebastian.
Oh.
Oh. As you see, I'm a painter.
Escape on the
Oh, disc escape. Okay. Thank you so much. And now we go back. And I go view slideshow, yes? I need help.
View.
Okay, and I will tell you about the alphabet. So the alphabet developed in a way that...
You want to get this out?
No, that's okay. Okay. It developed that I started to look into the idea of a language as a metaphor for the body. Because in painting, as much as in sculpture, it's always about specific poses. And in my paintings, I really try to communicate a message when it's about. Can everybody concentrate?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I try to get a message that the body has a specific language, yes? So, and for example, socialist sculptures, the women are always looking up. And this was based on, in the 1920s, avant-gardists from Czech Republic, Karl Tager, together with a which is embarrassing because I don't remember her name, with a woman writer and a dancer, they created the idea of the Buggy Alphabet. And further on from doing this, I was doing this with my friend actually in the Reconstructing Thomas Manneke. I showed him the piece, and that was the outfit I was wearing, and I did it on two, with 2 boxes from beers. He just put me up and I developed this work. And further on, I developed it in a little booklet, and then I had an idea of using it as an actual poetry performance. So first time we did it in the Meritage Gallery, which was run by Joseph Strauss, and I invited 3 poets to visualize, to create poems in connection to the alphabet. One was Joseph Strauss, who developed Fendi Life Essence, Francis Stark, I Cry, I Love You're Fucking Fantastic. It was a shorter version of the piece, and a Polish friend, kind of a science fiction writer, Paulus Mazur. This is one of my installations, but I wanted to show you with the example of using words. Yes, so this is a kind of like a mobile piece with an essential statement. Does the idea of revolution still have sense? Now, so I was developing for about 5-6 years all these works, traveling from Germany to Paris and to the States, talking about the Polish utopia. It was appreciated, but I was living at the same time in Warsaw, just by that building, which had a skeleton of a neon. And I kind of thought, like, I can be transforming all this work through artwork, but can I do actually something for the city? And it took me a couple of years to come to knowing who does the volleyball player belong to. It's a neon from 1962, developed in a way of neonization, which was also an applied fantastic term in communism, that one of our kind of presidents there of the party, he decided that Warsaw should be as beautiful as Las Vegas. So he had hired a lot of Polish artists to develop incredible abstract neons. So you had a building that was just underlined by a neon. And that was a 40-meter long, tall neon. And what is the most interesting for you, talking to you as young artists, is that I couldn't get anybody to pay for this renovation of this neon. It's not my work, it's not my building. And I talked to many institutions. I talked to mobile company who are like Orange. I don't know if you have this company. They're like, yeah, if we change the color of the light bulbs, then it could be fine, and so on. But I was starting to work with a Vauxhall Gallery Foundation, and I decided, I had this miracle when I was far away in Los Angeles. I decided to call it Painting Neon Exchange. So what I did is I made a painting show in the foundation of Gallery Vauxhall, developed a couple of works. I don't know if I have the works here. I developed a couple of works around the theme of the neon. One was a neon palimpsest. Oh, this is cute. This is a little video. It's very slow.
You can speed it up if you go forward.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah. It's a gift. It's a gift. We were a couple of long time.
You press it on the
Okay.
on the computer, it's faster.
Cool. So So this is another neon from a Polish countryside close to Krakow, from a small village. That further on, with the help of a local, kind of baker, by showing him the other production, I managed him to persuade to save a neon called Gazda, which is like the one that takes care of the sheep, which was the name of a supermarket. Then another neon really struck me as something gorgeous. It was the neon the flowers, and this was an exhibition in Austria, in Graz, in what was the year? I know, 2010, 12, 10. It was monumental sculpture works being exhibited in the city of Graz. And with the curator, director of this institution, Sabine Breiswieser, we were thinking of how this socialist sign could exist again in the city. So there were 3 neons placed on the top of a gas station, the flowers as the idea of like the gift, the flower shop, the 3 babushkas, and the neon of the cow with the drinking milk bar. And I'm very happy and proud to say that this neon was saved. For a long time I was hoping to put it back on the building in Poland, but they're treating these neons, for me these neons are really public artworks. But it's going to happen pretty soon, I hope, because the neon art is becoming back in fashion. But I'm very happy to have this work here in a quite brutalist also building coming down the stairs. You can see the work. So thank you for this Museum der Moderne Salzburg. As you see, I'm kind of jumping with a lot of subjects, and I'm just going to skip through a few. I'm just going to tell you briefly, this is a work from 2008 Biennale, which was about the idea of a reference to modernism. But for me it was also the moment when I decided to leave Berlin, when I was doing the DAD artist residency, and together with my partner we decided to kind of retreat from the art world, and we moved to a small village in Poland. And a big inspiration for this was Zofia Stryjeńska, a 1920s Polish artist who had an extreme, for me, style, combined kind of Slavicness / Mayan kind of art reference / Walt Disney. She was not regarded as a good artist. She was regarded as an applied artist from that kind of, on the verge of kitsch. But I saw a lot of subjects that kind of interested me. The idea of representation of a Slavic sexuality. Slavicness is another kind of topic which kind of deals with reference in contrast to like nationalistic thinking of where are we. And it was, I had also a theory that actually she was a futurist and she was an optimist. She was kind of thinking of creating this ideal world, a celebration of goddesses, celebration of folklore, and celebration of a uniqueness with nature. She also wrote beautiful diaries, and I think the diaries, they struck me the most because the diaries are called The Everyday Bread. And she was drawn to a mental hospital, her kids were taken away, and it was just too much for me not to deal with her. So this is my town, and this is the local puppet theater. And when I had the same kind of feeling as with Warsaw, with the neon, when I moved to the tiny village, and the only place for culture was the puppet theater. I went to the director of the puppet theater, who took me to the main priest of the village, and I said I would like to paint with my students from the Academy of Fine Arts in Gdansk. We would like to paint the puppet theater. from that moment on, I started to be very interested in theatricality, as also, I guess, one of a very, theater for me is a very interesting moment, especially now when we talk about performance and the Gesamtkunstwerk. So, you know, there is a lot of discussion, as even in the show in Salzburg that I was a part of the idea of dance entering performance. But I was very interested on what the theater actually means in regard of contemporary arts. So what you see is the Tate Modern. These are pictures from last year, Tate Modern, and I decided to use one of the galleries in Tate Modern to turn the gallery into a Polish cottage house, but the paintings were coming from the realist gallery. So I had the Matisse, I had a Picasso, I had some wonderful landscape and other artists that I cannot remember the names. And we recreated a play from 1970s, which is a surreal, mad, and narcotic play about a dysfunctional family living in a small house. And it served as an exhibition installation. So next door you had this surrealist. You probably all know this place and in the Tate because it's the free gallery, so it's always full of people. And I changed the gender, so the mother was a man and the son was a woman. So I decided, as Jan Vervoort, one of the fantastic writers, had said, to move to the side road of modernism, to leave the main road of modernism, which is building quite well. I must say, quite proud of it. From the 15 years of my work with modernism, there is a beautiful Museum of Modern Art being built, hopefully, in Warsaw. There is a lot more interest in public works. So I decided to concentrate on the idea of collaboration and discussion of artists, which I think I'm very much missing in the gallery world. This is why I'm so glad to be a part of the Summer Academy, because it's even the aspect of the summer and being together outside of the frames of like a typical institution creates a much more sensitive atmosphere. So this is what I tried to do with a residence, that I run in the small town of Rabka. And I had 4 editions. I raised money for it myself because, as probably some of you know, the Polish government is quite conservative. So if I would say I have spiritual voodoo priests or hallucinogenic mushrooms, I would definitely not get too much of a grant, rather police standing in front. And in a Grotowski manner, we meet, walk for 3 days in the mountains, we talk, and we have usually a subject. For example, this is from the meeting of artists, which was called the mycorial theater, mycorial coming from mushrooms, and theater coming from Grotowski. And for this, I was very lucky to get a sponsorship by a fantastic foundation, Furuci Art Trust, who they do a quite similar kind of spontaneous, beautiful abstract meetings in Stromboli on the island of the Volcano. This is the house. This is a picture of Sofia Rydet, and this is an invitation for the new upcoming show on the 20th of October. And ooh, this is my last slide, and I have 2 little films to show you, if this computer will permit me.
Press escape.
Escape.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So what I'm going to show you is one film is it's a very kind of, you're going to see fancy music, which one of my editor friends he did. It's from one of the gatherings of mycorial theater, and then I would like to show you 5 minutes of my last production from the kitchen, which is called the Slavic Goddesses. very loud. I cannot see anything on the computer here. Can we make it a little bit?
The next
Is it
video
here?
is lower in volume.
Okay.
And the sound was good.
If you say so. Bastian.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Slavic Goddesses, the wreath of ceremonies.
Yes, so the last production, just to tell you a couple of words, it was created especially for the kitchen in New York, which is an independent space for art, music, and dance. And it was, the costumes were based on Zofia Stryńska costumes of Slavic gods. The goddesses were deities, so to say. And Stryńska was working, I was lucky enough to look through the archives of the family, and I found out that she created a ballet that was never never executed with a lot of the pagan and Slavic references and productions. So I decided to work with a New York company for dance. They're called the Ballets, and they're the queer ballet. So it kind of seemed parallel for me that the deities, the goddesses, would not have a classical sense of a gender. And the music was created by Sergei Cherepnin, who, as a way, it's a kind of way nice continuation that I actually met in Salzburg, and we started to talk about, because both of us, we were part of the Der de Moroda show and march in the museum. So thank you so much for the attention. Sorry for the technical things. And thank you, Sabine, for joining me.
Get closer so it's getting warmer.
Can I just close this?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Is on? Yeah. So thank you, Paulina, for sharing this survey with us. I think this was great. I didn't know some of the early paintings, although, as Paulina pointed out, I had the privilege to collaborate on some projects with her. And yeah, I mean, you started out with the title Applied Fantastic, and so it's obviously sort of the opposite of autonomous independent art. I mean, at least here we distinguish a lot between applied art and autonomous art, so studio art, or art which doesn't have a further purpose. But obviously you are having something in mind. I mean, you're going sort of for a kind of utopian, visionary model of an artist, I would say. You're smiling.
Well, I think I want to review the model of the artist, yes, because the model of the artist is so old-fashioned nowadays. Who is the artist and who is not the artist? I mean, we can go probably to Andy Warhol, everybody can be an artist.
What is applied and not applied.
And what is applied and what is possible to the artist to reference and so on. I think we still have quite a lot of cliches, yes. Even with my work, I do get a lot of, a lot of kind of stereotypes, yes, that I do studio work, like for example with the costumes. It was all done with a certain kind of modesty, and I think I could probably pull out the list of the adjectives, you say, Steve, right? Descriptiveness of different kind of the role of the artist than the lonely artist in the studio doing the masterpiece, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly the point. I mean, in the arts we would rather speak about appropriation, which brings us back to the 80s, where you have been brought up in the United States, where sort of artists like Barbara Kruger, Richard Prince, Louis Lawler, many people who actually appropriated either vernacular, visuals, advertisements, all kinds of things out in the world, not necessarily to be considered as art, and appropriated, or rather adopted or used, not even transformed sometimes as you're doing it, as artworks in order well, actually, as a sort of second generation of pop art, someone would say. So this is the other term which I think I would relate to you, is instead of applied or appropriation, is also pop. These are sort of the elements one can read in your work. Either it's a painting or a collage or a performance. It always has this kind of element of pop. So as you told us today, you've grown up in Poland and moved to Chicago, where your art training started, in fact, at the art school of the Arts Institute, which is a great school. Do you want to share with us who have been...
Sure. Well, I think I wanted to, because you brought up two very important terms that I want to share with you, how I think about them. I'm going to start with the appropriation, yes? Mm-hmm. I started to appropriate modernism, not because I'm really into 1960s things, yes? I started to to deal with this because it was being demolished in front of my eyes. Yes, so in a way, because of the distance of being not being Polish and being able to move away, I just saw that that it's really important as an artist to negotiate what has been happening. And I'm talking about poster art. I'm talking about the architecture that was demolished, the neons. Now it's all slowly, with the leftovers that survive, it's starting to be remodeled. And I'm not into melancholy and nostalgia at all. I was just trying to negotiate, and I think that's my role as an artist, to negotiate the leftovers, yes? Are we going to deal with them, or are we going to dump them? And this is what I really liked in this term, improvised necessity, that inside of you, not as an art historian, you kind of feel like, I want to discuss this. I want to discuss the 1980s scene in Poland in relationship to the new wave in Germany. I want to discuss female artists of folkloric time in relationship of modernist 2008 Berlin Biennale, because I think this was for me. So it's about actually sharing or putting on a table. This is what I have with...
yeah, so but there are two things. There's one, the practice, the method, what you do, appropriating, adopting, or applying, and the other component is the content, where you have a very specific choice what kind of content you are appropriating, if we stick to the term, by going back your own history, your own path, the legacy of culture or neglected culture in your country.
You know, surely, you know, I was being brought up in an art academy, so to go back, I started studying in the Art Institute, but it was way too expensive, as everybody knows, so I decided to move back to Poland to a classical art academy in Gdansk, yes. So I had a little bit of relationship, you know, I was studying in the most feminist art school in the States now. Keith Carey Marshall, Paula Rego, Charles Ray, was the person. These were my kind of studies, persons that I was studying with, but I really wanted just to learn how to paint, so I thought I'm going to go back. And
that's already, if I may just stop you for a moment, kind of an important point. Not only you decided to go back from the United States to Poland, where probably most of the artists would have liked to do the other way, you even decided to go back to a more traditional way, if painting, I mean, I know that's another projection now, in order to be trained in a more, let's call it classical way of making art, right? That's already sort of a second choice, which is kind of unusual, I would even say.
Yes, because when I started painting, I think we had a couple of male artists that were dealing contemporary painting. It was like Eric Fischl, slowly Luc Tuymans was coming out, and maybe Franz Auerbach and so on. So there was very little discussion of what painting. Elizabeth Peyton came suddenly as a, you know, I would see, you know, in a faraway, you know, somebody would send me one of art.
So you're talking about Chicago now?
No, I'm talking about Pollock. I knew about those paintings, started studying them in the Art Institute of Chicago, but I just saw how little, you know, basically in 1990s in Poland, there was no place for painting, which had its reason because it was the radical time, yes? There were all my colleagues from, like from Żmijewski, Kozyra, and so on, they were trying to establish a new system, where me, Wilhelm Sasna, Marcin Maciejowski, we started to be a bit, because we were quite younger, to kind of fantasize, what are we going to deal with when this, you know, this past is gone. And also as a woman, I started to be surrounded only by painting professors, male professors, yes, in Gdansk. And I went briefly to Düsseldorf, and I was approached by Luppertz to join the school, but then I saw it's also kind of a farce of, you know, of being the genius painter. And I was not interested in this. I really wanted to treat painting as a subject of communication, just as, you know, Malevich and Stepanova and Goncharova and a lot of the Dutch artists, avant-gardists who were dealing with really, you know, expanding the painting to something different. And I tell you that I really believe it's possible, and painting can do a lot. That's why I called my course the future is painting, because I think culture is one of the strongest points of negotiation, what is happening right now in the world.
But obviously you have a sort of tendency of going back to the avant-garde, Russian avant-garde, where, or as you speak, I guess you mean the style, where there's sort of a different idea of art in terms of doing textile, fashion, painting, designing theater, working with language at the same time, so a kind of idea of a Gesamtkunstwerk, but at the same time somehow in the service of society, right? Do you understand your work in that
yes. Well,
direction?
A lot of my, I do curated shows as well, and I curated, Malevich, the boards of educational boards and the Stedelijk shows, and I do curated shows with artists that are on the border of being known, next to Cathy Wilkes and Cindy Sherman. So I try to, as much as I can, to question the stigmatic, the kind of like heavy things about what we know is a path of painting. And I see it even when we discuss it in the class, that there is so many stereotypes that we deal with what is painting every day, that I think it's worth kind of questioning it. But going back to pop art, I just wanted to say why I love pop art. I was fascinated with the figure that Paulina Botti. And Paulina Botti was an unknown English pop artist that was introduced to me by Michael Breiswald, an art historian dandy from London. And he said, you should look at this woman. And what is amazing about Paulina Botti in relationship to Richard Hamilton, even Hockney, because she's coming from the same school, that she embodied pop, yes? Pop, the men in the pop scene, they were kind of saying, oh, we are criticizing the commodity. But she loved the commodity. So she painted Belmondo with a big rose. She painted herself as Marilyn Monroe. And I just like this very close relationship, how we deal with a subject, that you can embody it and you can be it, and not always stay as a cool, person kind of criticizing or calling like, oh, this is something. So that's how I feel about, my relationship to work. I'm not a speaker. I make mistakes with historical reference. So I saw you kind of saying like, oh, Krupewski, oh, la, 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 la. But I kind of feel certain things, and that's my way of dealing with history, because I think we are, when I studied history, that's just one last anecdote. How I envision history is not parallel. It's written in some books as well. But when I was studying in Poland history, it was learned from the socialist point of view. And then when I went to high school in Chicago, I had the American version of the history. And then as an 11-year-old kid, I went kind of like schizo, right? So where am I? And I actually see so much of written history where there are other histories that are parallel and they're much more interesting.
So one could also say you use your work, your research also to trace history and kind of accommodate it in a way how you want to look at it. I mean, it was fascinating for me to see your early exercises on Pollock and Morris. I think that was fascinating. So there were a lot of men involved in the beginning, while now, obviously, you spoke about Straminska. You're really interested in kind of researching hidden women artist histories and paths of art history which are not written yet. As you said, you're not, and you are not, and you shouldn't be a historian. You don't have a systematic way. But how are you guided? How are you trapping in the next chapter of history? I mean,
it's Abby Warburg way. So it's a calendar of images. So one creates, I call it the wall of inspirations. And I'm very happy, very happy that I have a quite large studio the size of this room, maybe. And I just deal with a lot of images. And every time I enter the studio, the images, they tell me something else. Some are, and I
so you post them on the wall and you encounter them.
Hannah Hoch used the same system, but then she puts them in the books. Yes. So you start to, and some of them they can be coming from a newspaper, New York Times. Some can be coming from Ghana. Yes, I don't care. The images, the world is full of images, And then I use subconscious, which I think is the most important in our times as well, because obviously the reason is, it's being too much time focused on the reason. So I use my eyes and my kind of studio time to kind of relate to it. And if it's causing a certain chaos, I'm fine with chaos. I'm into magic of chaos as well.
Doesn't seem very chaotic to me, I must say, since I encounter your work. It happens if you do an exhibition, either it's an institution like here where we invited you to work on an archive which you were not necessarily meant to reflect on it directly, or if you do a show at Metro Pictures or whatever, you usually open a certain chapter. And I still remember the previous show in New York at Metro Pictures, where this was you opened a whole chapter on how you would say, covers of women's magazine, of knitting, and all these kind of things like we call Brigitte, but Polish editions or Eastern European do-it-yourself magazines. So you opened an entire new chapter and produced an entire series of works. So when do you feel a chapter needs to be closed, or is it done, or is it how strong is it related to an exhibition, and how much are you driven by your studio practice? Because I think you do both. You work on a basis where you sort of stimulate it through an invitation, but you also work a lot, what you do now, where you really focus on your work in the studio, in your small place, where not many people are around. How do you find this balance? Since we have so many artists here, I thought it might be fruitful to...
I think they're like already ready to go.
Okay.
But, well, I can tell you, as history is not parallel, I had an amazing trip to Belarus, to Minsk. I met a Polish artist, a woman artist that started to live in Minsk, and she was a part of a painting competition which I was in the jury. And I met her with her husband, and I decided to visit them. I didn't go to any of the big exhibitions. I thought, I'm going to Minsk for, now you can go for 6 days without visa, alone. And what I saw was beyond my understanding, because I thought my chapter of modernism is closed. Mm-hmm. Everything is done. Now the hipsters are taking, the communist sign, and they're, like referring to the neons and so on. And, this kind of fashion that I'm showing is being taken by, soon the Polish Vogue is coming out, and so on and so on. But what I saw in Minsk was a pure modernism, yes? Mm-hmm. But I saw a huge possibility how one can just see and deal with the applied arts in a sense of the communist socialist approach. So huge mosaics, huge tapestries and so on a subject that is very much related to my work, and they're preserved. Mm-hmm. They're not destroyed, they're fully preserved, and I think Lukashenko has some kind of plan, because I don't like going to Russia. Russia is quite complicated, but then I kind of thought, I made a movie there that I probably will be showing about the department store, and it just showed me that history is not parallel, and I think the best way is to take it, every day as you go, or every week and so on, and just, you can say something to yourself like, oh, I'm closing the chapter of modernism, now I'm going to be interested in spirituality and, New Age, yes? But if you really feel something and it comes to you, it's just, I know this sounds kind of like, but it's really like this.
You mentioned Jan Verwoerd, who spoke about you, that you're opening side roads of modernism. I mean, this already reaffirms that the sort of lines of modernism we know are the main roads, actually, which we, of course, a lot of people are working on sort of opening up, I wouldn't say side roads, but other chapters, I would say. But however, you have also been referring, and you mentioned Kotowski today, but I also know you've been working on Kraszinski, so there are a lot of artists who have been a major influence for your work and for your artistic practice. I didn't even know you when people told me you are kind of restaging the '68 event in Kraszinski's country house.
I
Do you
love
wanna
artists.
do you wanna speak a little bit about that? And I didn't know. And everyone said there's a promising young Polish artist. She's going to be doing. And maybe we have to explain a little bit this event. And you as a
Okay, it's 1968. There is a ban in Poland, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of artists, bohemians, some of them that they created, the Tea and Yeah magazine, which I speak a lot in my work, they decide to rebel. They cannot rebel on the streets because they would be killed very quickly by police. So they decide to throw a party, and one of them is Kaczynski. So they re-establish the Bruegel scene of the bohemians and so on. One guy brings a lot of sausages from Paris, as I remember, and they kind of restage this kind of utopic scenery.
And just to mention, Edward Kaczynski is a Polish neo-avant-garde artist.
Yes, we had a show here recently.
Yeah, we should work with
Yes.
him here. Yeah.
And
And you restaged this?
Yes, but it was very much like, you know, if in a group we would stage, it was very kind of casual, but sometimes history is created very quickly, like with the Nowa Popularna bar, that, you know, that sometimes the things that are, again, just happening in between kind of friends in a gathering, they become quite interesting.
So now I'm interested what you're learning, what you take from these kind of events like Nowa Popularna or also the 68. Is this something? I mean, there's always a next work after that. What you're learning from this?
I think I really enjoy liveliness in art, and I really think of painting as an applied art, but with a form of, like, I talk a lot about painting as a like a poster manifestation, like a poster, that it's an ad for a subject matter. So I think I take what I enjoy the most in art, which is being with people, being with artists, exchanging ideas, and creating a kind of a surreal kind of environment to be, you know, a little bit taking away from the kind of brutal capitalist idea of what the word
commodification. Yeah. So since we're talking about sharing and joining, are there any questions to Paulina? Yes.
I would have a very naive question in terms of painting. You have been talking very much about your education and your interest, specifically your interest to become a painter. Now, your practical work has not so much to do with your own doing paintings, or do I misunderstand it?
Well, I try to focus here because of our class as well. I use painting as, you know, I hated the word, something that, like, iconic, the genius, the masterpiece. Still in Poland we use the word, I create masterpieces. And it has a male relation, yes, because the masterpiece is created by a master, not by the mistress. So I'm interested in the mistress, and I'm interested how the mistress, so the naked lady, she comes and she paints the painting of herself in a way of a metaphor. So yes, I showed, I do a lot of paintings. I think I painted 300-400 paintings. I painted a lot of paintings myself. Now when I work on larger projects, I work with students from art academies such as Martyna, who's here, who's my co-teacher from Krakow. I cannot be a teacher in Poland because of the kind of classical conservative idea of an academy. And I think I would be too anxious to be a part of a very closed group because I like to be open. So I think I showed you a couple of like Stryjinska exhibition in Berlin is a really nice transmission how I think of paintings, that they dance, yes? The Stryjinska's drawings become a dance form. So I try, I even made paintings on wheels one time to kind of move the painting, that the painting has really this power of movement. And, I did just a huge painting show when I was locked for 8 months, which I was doing only painting for New York this fall, that Sabine saw, which was called Mystery, Hysteria. I must say to you, I'm so emotional about my paintings that it's just very hard for me to show paintings, so it's easier to talk about projects.
But the interesting, what's interesting in the Streminska project, especially that you translated the painting, the small color painting, to huge black and white paintings, where you also questions the issue of the document versus the original painting, and then you translated the paintings again in full life-size, colorful costumes taken out from the painting.
After 10 years.
Yes, so it hits you back, obviously. Yeah, and you even showed the original paintings on the backside of the enlarged black and white paintings. So there's a lot of transformation and appropriation going on in between. So there are obviously some topics that, come back to you, and you take them up again and find another entry how to transform and
it's very complicated.
Apply it.
This is very complicated.
So it's also a little bit, one could say it's not only applied fantastic, it's also applied art, because you apply the art of someone else and turn it into something else.
I think we
and
all
still
did
reference the original, so-called original author, whatever. So is this a collaboration? Would you consider
always
this?
a collaboration? Never a power structure. I never had problems with any power structure. That's what I like about the real appropriation, which I call the female appropriation, which is not relating to the postmodernism, when you take something or like a Marlboro advertising and you turn it into an artwork. But with me, it's all about collaborations with people, with ghosts, with people from other occupations, other artists such as applied artists, naive artists. I'm working with a leather artist right now for a show. And also, it's not true that I collaborate only with women, just so you know.
Yeah, we saw the Pollock. So you also collaborate with artists who are not alive anymore.
Yes, I love them the most.
The ghost. Asking less questions. More questions to Paulina? Yes, one in the back.
Oh, Karen.
You were talking about you want to preserve modernism from Poland and also Russia. Do you feel that there's something to preserve, for instance, in Chicago, or are you interested in that, or do you feel that things are disappearing also?
Surely. This is again then, because I have too many ideas, I try to be focused. And I guess my life in Chicago I was quite young when I left Chicago. I haven't been there further. It was a little bit of a traumatic life of a child in the suburbs from a Polish middle-class background, immigrated family. So I do relate it to it. I was talking to Thomas the other day about my father's Wu-Tang Clan jacket. I didn't do anything about that, but sometimes Chicago is going back in my paintings. Definitely, there is a pull back and forth. If I will work for an exhibition in Chicago, I would definitely think about referencing it, and I'm thinking of working on such a thing. So basically, it's very important for me whenever I do shows outside. I'm not only bringing kind of my background culture. I'm trying to, really spend time, and as in Aachen, for example, I focus on the needle factory, on the idea of the worker, on the idea of the city as the holy city as well. I try to be as delicate and as kind of taking indigent of what can come.
And I remember when we executed the neon sign in Graz, you even came with Polish workers.
You love that.
No, it was really impressive, because I had to deal with 10 artists producing a new site-specific work, and here came the artist on the van with the Polish workers, and she was researching the same company who actually produced the neons in the 50s,
yes,
and you were hanging out with them with beer in Graz and things like that. And you even made one to perform a piece, which was quite fascinating, because you really loved it. So you're really engaging. It's really a collaboration, even if there is not an author anymore. You're engaging with the sort of producers, or in this case, the workers doing the neons, and giving them a special role, because he performed all the names of the neon signs in this dangerous situation.
In Polish.
In Polish, yeah. Yeah, but that's quite interesting. And the same when we rehearsed the piece for New York, for the Museum of Modern Art, you were for days in this kind of seminar room rehearsing with the 4 people. And one should add, it was originally, you saw the 2 videos, inside and outside. The originally plan was to stage it only outside in the famous Philip Johnson sculpture garden, where there was an exhibition called The Figure in the Garden, which were mostly female figures done by male artists, of course. So here we had your reference, and that's why the pedestal was this fake marble and all those things, and only because of the rain it had to move in the atrium where this
2 times, I think.
Ellsworth Kelly was behind, which we love, but it was quite a different setting. However, exactly. Yeah, but that, I mean, this kind of...
Is it more questions, or we take it to the class?
Yeah.
Take it to the class. I would like to invite everybody to the
there was,
opening
maybe
studios.
There's one question maybe before we...
A little question, because...
Oh, there you are.
You showed us how you was in the whole world, and then you went back to this little small village, and I want to ask you how it is for you. And then there was scenes of the Slavic Goddesses, and is it to look for your identity, or is it only to take the stuff who was in the history and you mix it with new ideas? Or because I'm also an artist and from the countryside, and I know sometimes the narrowness on the countryside, and I want to ask you about this.
It's been 10 years since I moved to the countryside, from very lively, from Hollywood to, from Japan to where I was living, San Francisco, Berlin, to Poland. I was lucky because I was joined by a person that I love, and it was quite early on, but I started very early on to do work when I was 20, so I was 30, and it was very hard in the beginning. I was calling my friends, but I travel a lot, and I take this time as my time for concentration and meditation on painting, and I think this is exquisite. I really recommend to everybody. It's less expensive. You don't have temptations from the everyday world. I don't go to parties. I just go for very direct missions. Mission Summer Academy, mission this. And it's much more, as in a colloquial, it's much more unnecessary things that I think, we are trapped a little bit in this kind of, everydayness. So this is how I found my way. Believe me, I was like 5 times going to Paris, moving my stuff and so on, but then I come back, So this is my way. Also, what is a countryside now, with our ideas of the cities as well. Everything is kind of like a city and a countryside in once. Even my village, I don't know if it's a village or a countryside. I just have a lot of trees and animals around, which is nice. I'm sorry that I'm speaking so unprofessional artist talk, but as my class knows already.
But you also question, I think, what it means in the environment, the narrowness of the society, your neighbors maybe. But
I love my neighbors.
Your setting is kind of special, right? There's only Paulina Olowska there, basically.
No, nobody knows me. They know me in some painting. They sometimes come in. Yeah. I remember when I was in New York for Cindy Sherman opening, and then I met some art form people that I didn't know, and I said, you know what, I'm really tired. I'm going back to my village. I will have my feminism there. And what is the most, I think, interesting, what I wanted to share with you, what I found out, that you can create as interesting subject matter in a small village. One can research. I researched the puppet theater, then I researched some posters, then I researched some Christian imagery that nobody found, and naive artists. So there's artists everywhere, but it's how you negotiate it. So this was very interesting for me, and this is, I think, for a lot of art students that I teach for the moment in the University of Geneva, and I just see that everybody has the same reference, and it's coming from the typical art magazines, yes? And I have a no-no list, you know, like, don't speak to me about these names because, you know, find a Geneva artist, you know, a woodman or a puppeteer. Speak to me about this because I think it's time to open, and this is why I like this opening of, you know, making a performance with guys, neon guys, because it is about the real celebration, and I think art is a celebration of, you know, of humanity, humanitarian kind of thoughts. You know, I'm not pro-socialism as well, but I think that system kind of dictates much better the idea of a society, and not so much.
Yeah, but to find the right balance of sort of having, being able to articulate your work in a sort of international language, talking, I mean, being present in museums, one of the most important museums, your work has been presented and collected, but at the same time finding sort of what Homi Bhabha called the locality of culture, right? To being local, to dare to be local, to find sort of these narrative stories and local historical productions you're kind of excavating, but also transforming into your language, which is an international language, because as you were telling us, you have been living on so many places and been educated on so many places, so not in Rabanica, that's where you're now. Yes. So that makes a difference, I think. Yes. Yeah, and also you're able to invite a lot of people, or they come to see you, even your students you did sometimes, right?
Yeah, international artists has been, and you know, from Claire Bishop to Daniel Baumann and so on.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people, you know, there are
visiting, a lot of
people
and
coming because it's as interesting as everywhere else. But I see people leaving, which I'm so always sad about, so I'm going to say goodbye.
To those who are leaving or to us?
Do you want to continue?
No, I'm fine.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Paulina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I wanted to say about the Summer Art Academy Open Studios, which is on the 25th. Please come, because there's a lot of interesting work, and we can continue conversations always.
Absolutely.
In this circumstances. Thank you so much for coming, especially you from the countryside.
To the capital of Salzburg.